Hello, I want to tell you a story. And the story is about a white hart that leads a boy into the forest. And the white hart is a big symbol within mythology that comes from these islands. The white hart is always a symbol of the wild, it's a symbol of the land. But because it's a white hart, it means the land is coming to talk to you. And when you see the white hart, it will lead you to the wild places. And there's a lesson for you there. Now, a couple of years ago, a white deer, was shot dead in the streets of Liverpool by the police. It was one of the most bizarre things I've ever seen in my life. This white stag appeared out of nowhere on the streets of Bootle. And Bootle's a very deprived area of Liverpool. Huge crime problems, drug problems, and everything that goes with that, everything that comes up from the ground with that. And this traumatised stag ran about the streets of Bootle, and apparently they couldn't sedate it. It was unable to be sedated for some reason or other, and the police said they had no choice but to shoot it dead. It's a catalogue of events that sort of you couldn't write if you wanted to have a modern day myth and symbol of our times. It would take a great mind to think that up, but it was actually articulated for us by reality. We watched that happen. So it's interesting to consider what was taking place there and what was being said. With that in mind, we'll talk about the story. In a kingdom not too far away and not too long ago, because it's all in our heart and inside us and taking place at the same time, all these things live within us. But in this kingdom that lives within us, if we open the door to it, there was a king and a queen, and they were fair and good people, and they kept the land in balance and they kept the land in peace. And they had one child, a son and heir. And they celebrated their son because they knew when they had an heir, they knew the land was going to be looked after, and the continuation of the peace and the prosperity and the balance had a chance. But they were very disappointed with their son, because their son was a bit spoiled. He was a bit of a rocket, to tell you the truth. And they didn't know quite what to do with him, because he liked drinking, he liked hunting, and he liked lying in his bed, and he liked chasing girls. Not necessarily in that order. So, the king fretted and fretted over this, but the queen was wise, and the queen said, "Don't worry about it. Something will happen to change your boy. Something will be put his way. And if he's wise enough and smart enough to understand what's been put his way, he's going to be okay. And we've raised him best we can. So we've made him ready for this situation, and hopefully our readiness will prepare him to receive this blessing he's going to have. Because we can't give him this blessing because we're his parents, and we're normally too soft with him. He needs a bit of harshness. He needs a bit of sand that makes the pearl and the oyster." So not long after that, the son went hunting with his friends. And as usual, it was a drunken duck chase on horses, where they weren't that interested in the hunting at all. They were more interested in sort of cutting about in the horses and having a bit of a laugh. But then near the woods, a white stag appeared. And the prince was really taken by this white stag, and he wanted to hunt it. And none of his friends did. They thought, nah, it's too dangerous. It's going to head towards the woods. We're not going to chase that. But something took hold of him, and he had to chase the white stag. So on his own, he chased the white stag into the forest. And it felt like he chased it for many miles. And after riding for quite some time in the dark forest, he came to a clearing. And the stag stopped in the clearing, looked over its shoulder at something, then turned back and looked straight at him, and galloped off into the forest once more. And he galloped after it, but he couldn't see it anywhere. So he kept riding For a good few minutes, and he found himself back in the clearing. He rode out again in a different direction, rode again for maybe half an hour, back in the clearing. Rode again for an hour, came back and found himself back in the clearing, as if he could not escape this clearing. Totally frustrated, his horse totally blown, dripping in sweat, he saw in the clearing there was a pool. So he thought, I'll cool down. So he stripped off his clothes, went into the pool, and doused himself in the water, and enjoyed lying on his back and looking at the sky for a few minutes. When he'd cooled himself and he felt refreshed, he came out of the pool and noticed that somebody had nicked his horse and nicked all his clothes, and he was fuming. What could he do about the situation? He was naked in the forest. He had nothing to cover himself with. He had to quickly go and make things out of what was surrounding him, mainly grass, and tie it together. And he tried to remember the rudimentary sort of braiding skills he'd been taught in primary school, and tried to build something that he could wear so to protect his modesty, so when he went back to the castle in shame. So he put on this sort of braided glass loincloth and walked into the forest. But once more, no matter how long he walked, he always ended up back in the clearing. And he walked for miles, and it was starting to get dark, and he was starting to get worried. And he got back to the clearing and realised he was going to have to make a shelter. He was going to have to live there. And this went on for weeks. He eventually had to learn how to live there. He knew how to hunt a little bit. He knew how to trap food. He made a rudimentary shelter. He learned to make fire. But these things were long time and hard won. But as summer went on, he grew some sort of comfort, and he got some sort of routine, and he learned how to stand on his own 2 feet. Then winter came. And he knew he had to save food for the winter, but there was not enough for him to hunt and gather. He could dry meat and have some berries, but very soon, in winter, around about December, he started to run out of food, and he was desperate. And his belly became as tight as a drum, and most of it stuck to the back of his ribs. And he looked at the forest round about him, and he learned to talk to the forest, and he asked the forest for help. He asked the sun for help, and he asked the moon for help. And he got this idea that maybe if he walked into the forest again, something different would take place. So he walked into the forest, clothed in the garb that he had made. He was clothed totally in the vegetation he had found. He was covered in bark and leaves and grass. And he found that he came to a different place. He came to a village, a very small village, with a table sitting. And there was a young girl who had just come back from milking the cows, and she had a bucket of milk. And he saw her, and overjoyed, and ran towards her. And she took one look at him and dropped the milk and ran into her little hut that was close by. And he went round and pounded on the doors of all the huts. Please help me, I'm starving, I am starving, I need to eat. I will die, the winter will kill me unless you help me. Nobody replied, nobody came out of the huts. Because all they saw was a man from the forest. All they saw was a creature from the forest. All they saw was a creature from the land. And they were scared of the land spirits. So he returned back to the clearing, dejected. But he was so hungry that the next day he felt he had to return and try again. He had no other choice. He was going to die otherwise. He needed help. And he returned to the village, and lo, on the table in the village was a full meal and a pitcher of milk. And he ate the meal and drank milk and went back to his clearing. And this took place every day in winter. He was given this offering like he was one of the Sidhe. And he understood what it was to be a wood spirit. He understood what it was to be part of the earth. Eventually spring came, and he was that much in rhythm with the land. The joy that came with spring owned him, and he spent several days in reverie of just the new life coming to the land. And then one day, a white stag galloped into the clearing, turned its head and looked right at him. And with the unspoken language, it told him exactly what to do. He hid, and he waited until he saw the young prince frustratingly galloping through the clearing several times. And then when he came back hot and blown, getting off his horse, stripping his clothes, and going into the pool. And he left his hiding place, stripped off all he had made from the forest, put on the young man's clothes, and took his horse and rode out of the forest and rode back to the kingdom. And when he came to the bridge to go into the castle, all the subjects gathered to see the new king come. And his mother and father stood by the gate and knew that the land would be in good hands, because their boy had been tempered by the ground. So, that's the story. I hope you enjoyed it, and maybe I'll come back and tell another one at some point in time. Thank you.